Hi there, I'm John and welcome to my YouTube channel. I decided to do a very late Q1 reading wrap up. That's like the first 3 months of the year, January to March, and what I read in that time, because I think I initially intended for the channel this year to do like wrap ups as they came, like January, then do it early February as they came in succession. But like I said in the last video, school and all got in the way, so yeah, I think it's better late than never. So if I can get this one out of the way, I can then start the proper wrap-ups from next month. I think I am definitely going to do an April wrap-up because that's the month in which I read the most, or in which I finished the most books, which were 4 books. So that will be coming after a video after this video, so look out for that. But yeah, the Q1 reading wrap up, how many books I read then, and just like a kind of quick review, a review type thing of the following books. But yes, please bear, once again, bear with the noise. And I don't know, you guys can tell me if you prefer this setting or if you prefer the other setting. I don't know, I personally like that one, although there's like, it has been a bit dark over time, like it has been said on here. But yeah, I don't know if this will look a bit brighter. But yeah, if you guys prefer, you just let me know which one you guys prefer. But yeah, let's get into the video. So between January and March, I read 5 books, which I am going to talk about. I think I read 3 books in January. I finished 3 books in January. I finished a book in February, and I finished a book in March. So 5 books, and yeah, let's get into it. So in January, the first book I finished and I read was a poetry collection called Thirst by an author named Christian Boss. I think that's how you say the name. I'll put up a photo of the book here. So I saw this book at the fair when they came around. Yes, it came around in January, and I saw it there, and it was a very short, slim poetry collection with like very, very little poetry per page. So I was like, this seems short. I would like to boost up my reading goal, and so I decided to sit there at the fair and read it entirely in one sitting. And yeah, it was a Christian poetry collection which I had not come across before, and I was quite pleased to see it. I'm a very strong Christian myself, raised Christian, but also developed in my own Christianity as I've gotten older. And so I was very pleased with the collection. It was like unlike anything I've ever read. I'm not a very big poetry person, but I really appreciated it, especially at the time where it came for me, because I was having a lot of like battles, challenges, and it's essentially a poetry collection that is built entirely around Psalm 42, and the author described it as a collection that was birthed in a place of prayer and in fellowship with the Holy Spirit, which I found very intriguing. And yeah, it's just a collection that offers the Christian, the believer, hope on how to always turn to God and looking unto God as as the source of strength and everything, which I really liked. And it's a very short poetry collection, but it has a lot of courage and hope it can offer to the believer. It's kind of a strengthener for the weary believer. And yeah, it's actually probably the first book I have decided not to read ever. Maybe yes, I've decided not to read after reading, because I just felt a bit more personal with it, and it just kind of came to this conclusion of not like things like this, especially not necessarily having to need a rating attached to them. But I really enjoyed it. It's very short, very snappy, and yes, but in those very snappy pages there's a lot of strength that can be drawn from it. There's a lot of like reinvigorating of like why you maybe decide to take on like the Christian walk in the first place. It kind of reminds you, it has sprinkles of the word in it, which is kind of just a nice blend. And so it's not just like words from the poetry collection, but it's like words from the word of God, like giving strength as well. And yeah, I really like it. Thirst is the name, so if you are looking to check out this book, like I said, I'll put up the cover, and yeah, I really liked it. The next book I finished was Little Weirds by Jenny Slate, and this is a collection of personal essays by actress and author Jenny Slate. I think I did not know she was an actress. I did not know she was an author. I did not know her. In fact, I just know I saw this book before watching the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. Then I later found out that it was the actress with the dog that wrote the book. The kind of collection that essentially looks at what it means to be a person, an individual person in the world, and there's sprinkles of like womanhood, talks on womanhood and love and just like self-love, and there's a lot of self-examination in it as well. And I really liked the writing. I really liked most of the writing, and the essays, they kind of it's kind of like blends like essays some and musings other ones, and they are never like really long essays. Sometimes they are like one sentence succinct musings, and other times maybe a few pages of essays, but a personal essay from a time in our life or an event. And every time, the common thread I saw throughout reading the novel was just like there was such a softness to the writing, a softness to how she expressed herself in her writing, and how it's just a woman who is desiring better for herself, who desires love for herself, and it just touched me endlessly. And there's a lot of like wonderful self-examination on being a person and like bad habits and how sometimes we self-sabotage ourselves. Just a woman who desires to be loved, and I really liked the softness of Slate's writing and how it's just like raw on the page, and it's just a whirlwind of emotions from the varying essays. And there's a lot of weirdness too in the essays, like the book is called Little Weird, so there's a lot of weirdness in some of the essays. And sometimes that was like kind of my gripe with it, because there'll be like there's the very personal, every essay is personal, but there'll be instances where there's like some too avant-garde thing going on with the writing, which kind of like loses you sometimes, which I always do not like those kind of things. I like you can self-indulge, but like there are points where it starts to get too jarring for me. And so those were like the little parts where I had issues with her writing. If not, there were like for a good chunk of it, it's just like personal self-examination, punch after punch. I enjoyed the collection, and I think so far this year it's not my favorite book I have read, but it's the book that has passages and quotes I go back to the most. It's the book I have gone back to over and over again. So there are certain quotes I have lifted and posted a lot from this collection, and that I think I will remember till the end of the year. It's one of like maybe the book with like some of the most memorable things I've read in a while. And yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars, so I actually recommend it to be checked out. And the third book I read in January was physical book. It was Company Man by Brent Wade. And yes, I got this at the fair, like a majority of my books. And I think the year I got it, which was, I think was last year, I saw it. I'd never seen this author's name. I never seen anything related to it. The cover, I did not know anything about it. Then I decided to look, but something drew me to it. That happens for me with books. Something just like it's calling me with a certain kind of book. So something drew me to it, and I thought of like checking, why not check this book out? Why not check this book out? Or why not just buy it? So it was like 500 naira, which is like less than $1 now in a way. Yes, I think so, with the current currency rate. So I just got it, and something just told me, when you read this, you like it a lot, and you like it a lot. And so I caved, I bought it, and I decided to read it in January because it was not too long, just like a little over 200 pages. And yeah, I read in January. And thoughts. So the central story about the novel, I don't know if I mentioned this is a novel. Central story about the novel is that it looks at what it means to be a black man, a black person in a way, in white corporate America. We follow a man, Bill Covington, who is telling us the story, kind of the story of his life in a way, but the story of what has landed him in the hospital and put him where he's at. And so yeah, it's kind of a narration of sorts. It's kind of a letter to a childhood friend who he has not seen for 19 years, and so he opens up the book, and slowly we begin to learn about like he's getting the job at this white populated company, and just how things have progressed from there. And what Brentwood really examines is being a black person and the idea of conformity, because our main character Bill is one of very few black men who is one of very few black men in a company who somehow manages to make his way to not the top, but where he's sitting with some of the top people in the company. And so it's we learn from this narration to his friend how leaving college and all, he joins this, I think it's an advertising firm or something. I'm a bit like spotty on my memory of what the company was about, but joins this company, starts out low, but he somehow falls in contact with one of the top men of the organization, one of like the top heads, and he somehow makes his way up via the aid of that man, of the white man helping him. From there we just get plenty examinations of what it means to be black and what it means, and the idea of like necessity for conformity in this kind of space where you know that there's not going to be a lot of people that like you and things like that, and you have to, and it's like, do you play along into the whole thing, because there's a lot of like microaggressions that one is probably going to deal with, which we see in the novel, and there's a contrast between our main character Bill and a side character who is not like major or explored there, but there are instances where things come up of like the other character being another black man in the company and finding it odd that our main character Bill kind of like flows too well with some of the white people, because we see the evident microaggressions and he sees them. So it's like it's an idea of like setting it aside for the purpose of the job, which I think Brentwood tends to tackle and look at in the novel. It is a look at catering to the needs of to the standards of these people, because like being black, there are standards set for, there are standards which are put in place, there are things which he cannot do, and there are things which he has to overlook a lot of the time. And I think what Brentwood tries to look at is the idea that sometimes that is the only way, and it kind of makes a critique on like the overall landscape of like being black in America, because observing from here, being an observer from here, I see a lot of things which I do not really like, especially when it comes to like the thought of like being in job spaces and having sometimes to make everything about being black. And I'm trying to be careful with my words, but I think in a way that's the central thing with this novel, is that it has race at the center, but it tries to, from the character's perspective, look at how race is not necessarily like the center in cases like this. And sometimes we get the sense that okay, our main character is kind of deluding himself, because it's always like almost inevitable that there will be some microaggression and there will be some like racism, in fact, like put out there, especially like from top heads. And so sitting in like not necessarily the top but close to the top, there's a bit of like feeling out of place, but it's where he has gotten to. And we see that sometimes he has to play into certain things that you think should not normally be played into, but our main character kind of makes the argument for why these things are done. And in a way he's kind of like anti the idea of like feeling victimized at every point of the way. It's more like he settles that this is what it is, and he kind of does not really mind what it is, because I think we get a character whose primary motivation is sitting at the top, staying at the top, and money, and getting good money, and being one of like the top black people in the firm, which is not what a lot of people can say, even like in the space, looking at a lot of various companies at the time. Not what a lot of companies can show that okay, there's like a kind of a black person who is near executive level, or maybe even executive level. And yeah, I really like how these things are explored in the book, and I really enjoyed like the writing style. There's a bit of like a literary feel to it, which is not what I was expecting, and very great prose at points also. And yes, there's a little look at the friendship which I mentioned earlier, because he's writing to a friend, and there's a little look at this friendship. It's not like the major theme explored in the novel, but it's like there are little instances where it comes up that really touched me, and I really appreciated. I kind of not have minded if it went that route and it was looking at his life in general. And yes, it is looking at the man's life, it is looking at Bill's life, our main character, but part of it is undeniable that more of it is like looking at his life as a company man. In a way, our main character is kind of created for me in my head and in this book as it's kind of like an argument against the fact that catering and, let's say, servicing these needs, or like, yes, catering to like the standards that these white people might set, is kind of an argument to the fact that that is like a bad thing, and that it's like a loss of oneself, because he's very much, what we see across the book is that he's a very self-assured character, self-assured in himself and him, like his morality, because it's not a point where he feels like he's losing like moral standard, or where he has to make his, let's say, blackness like the center of everything. We see, yes, that there are instances where he's aware, but it's a kind of case of like, what is the cost for sitting at a position like the one where he has gotten to, and what are the necessary things to overlook. And so there are things that are kind of sidelined, like speaking up on, let's say, little things like this. And it's a book that I did not love it as much as I thought I would have, but I really enjoyed like its examinations. And yeah, I really enjoyed the examinations, and it kind of has certain ideologies that I've always had as well. So yeah, Company Man by Brent Wade, I gave this 3 stars. So in February, I finished The Vulnerables by Sigrid Nunes, and I've mentioned Sigrid Nunes on this channel before. She's one of my favorite authors of all time. 2 of her books made my top books of last year, and she was the #1 as well. And so yeah, I got an arc for her book The Vulnerables, which came out last year in the US November. It came out in the UK in January, and I tried getting the arc from the US publishers, but I was not granted. But luckily, I applied via the UK publishers, Virago Press. Yeah, I got it, and I was so pleased, so happy. And once again, it's just a pleasure to announce that Sigrid Nunes is one of the best, the greatest living writers today, maybe one of the greatest of all time, especially in her style, in just a writer that understands the human experience, that understands humanity, and can fit it into her work and offer it. And it's her work all the time, it's always an eye-opener, and she's one of the kind of authors where it is a privilege to read her. It is a privilege to witness her art, and I've just been so grateful to get to experience our work. So just quick summary, because I do have a written review. I have a full written review of this book on I write for a Substack. I write for a French Substack. I upload my reviews there now, and yes, I will put the link below, and it's uploaded there. And one of the little highlights was that I sent the review to her publicist. I sent the review to her publicist, and so if she could get it across to her, because I would have really loved her to see it. And she saw it and emailed me back, which was just a treat for me and just a delight to my heart, because this is like a little something for me, which I do not think is always like a big dream or an achievable dream for someone who is here, because reading is, yes, popular, but it's not something that is being done, like it's being taken seriously sometimes, especially in my like circle among the people I know. So it really pleased me. And yeah, but The Vulnerables, it's essentially a pandemic novel. It shows us our life in the time and what we were like. 2020 was a crazy and a wild time for a lot of us, and so it was just an insight into how we behaved then, how our thought processes were, and how it was just generally a hard time for everybody. And it's through the lens of one woman, an unnamed woman, an unnamed character. It's through her eyes we see this entire time, but in a way it's kind of a collective experience. It's undeniably a collective experience that Nunez manages to capture through the eyes of one woman. And there's a lot of like humanity, and there's a lot of writing. I think it's a novel with the most writing, like discussions of writing as an art, as profession, and as passion. And I really loved those segments as well. And yes, I don't want to like delve too much into it because I kind of have written on it already, and I would really love you to check out the review and check out the book. Actually, it's my favorite book of the year so far. As all our works are, it's a look at the human experience, and there's the references to so many different lives here, which and the literary references used to tie this together and just used to show us different things. And there's a look at like the loneliness of the time and how companionship was necessary also for a lot of people in the time, because it was a time that the major way in which it affected the world, in a way it was a time that was felt by the world, and it affected a lot of people mentally. That was like, it's for people who were not affected with the virus, the primary thing was the mental like dissonance, because there was the restrictions on not going out. And so it was like what we did then, it looks, we see how what we did, like what we tried to do to fill our days, what we try to hold on to. I think it's a very brilliant book. It's probably the first pandemic novel I've read, and she does it right. It's her main character is all of us in the time, and she's just a writer for the ages, and I recommend her all the time. I cannot wait to go through her backlist and read everything. She stuns me every time. I don't know how to put into words properly, like I said, since I've read it, but I would love if you checked out the review. I will probably leave the link below so you can check it out. And yeah, but I gave this 4 stars. In March, I finished my third reread of Sorrow and Bliss, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And yeah, I've talked about this book a lot. I've recommended it, and it's one of the best books that looks at mental illness which I've read, and the warmest, funniest, one of the funniest, probably maybe the funniest books I've read. I managed to get it physically and annotated the hell out of it this time. The supporting characters in this are some of the best in fiction I've ever read. Like, this is where you see supporting characters like very well utilized. The story of a woman struggling through life is the story of a marriage, and it's the story of a marriage falling apart, and it's the story of loving somebody with a mental illness, but how sometimes people like that so can weaponize like their condition and use it in a way as excuses for bad behavior over time, where sometimes you have to kind of separate if it's as a result of the mental illness or if it's just like a personal character trait. For the book, this is the first time I've read the book 3 times, and I love it endlessly. I recommend it endlessly. Please check it out. I adore this book. And so yeah, this will be the end of this video. I'm sorry about all the noise. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's not too much. I'll definitely maybe stick with my other space for now, or maybe try when there's not so much noise. But yeah, if you have read any of these books, please let me know. If there is anyone you are looking to check out and you need a bit more on, I can definitely ask me in the comments. I can definitely expound. And yeah, I hope you are doing well, and please like and share and subscribe. I'll definitely be shelling out more content, and would love more of us to be here. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.